one. Well, hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got a good question for you, and I found a great guy that's going to help us through this today. So I know I struggle with this. I struggle with it even to this day at times. So I'm just going to be completely vulnerable and put that out there right away. So hopefully you can at least assess where you are in this journey. And the question is, do you get anxious or feel awkward when trying to develop a deeper relationship with either a prospect or a client? And I'm like, yeah, you know what? That's a pretty timely thing. Rob and I were talking before we jumped on, and COVID obviously had something to do with this. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Rob Giardinelli. I got it right the first time. So, how are you today, my friend?
I'm great, Dave. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. You are the founder of a newer company. Excited to unpack this. It's called Event Mindset. So fill us in on what Event Mindset is.
Yes, so event mindset, I help people overcome awkwardness and anxiety at business, social, and networking events to improve their confidence, grow their sales, and develop deeper overall relationships.
Wow. That's like, there it is right there. Just lay it out there. You want to improve your sales, you want to improve your connection with your customer. Those are really powerful things. And I feel like this is a really either misunderstood or missed topic a lot. So I'm glad again to be hanging out with you today, Rob. So I want to just kind of start at the beginning. So let's just say for somebody listening today that they have a business networking event coming up. Now, I know that over the years, some people, their goal is just to get through it. Their goal is, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. Most people don't seem to have goals when it comes to business networking. So, what's your suggestion from that goal setting perspective, just to start?
So first of all, I'm glad you walked right into what I was going to say, which is goals. And what I recommend to people, and I when I work with clients, is I basically have three bucket silos of goals. So there are goals that improve your confidence, there are goals that give you purpose, and there are goals for joy. And the goals for confidence are going to be, it could just be, I'm going to walk up to two people I don't know. Because some people, especially if they're at networking events, they may tend to only hang out with people they know. So that
Right.
could be an example of a confidence goal. A
Okay.
purpose goal is going to kind of be more of those measurable. I want to set up one appointment with somebody. I want to set up a follow-up call. I want to exchange information with six or seven people. And then the joy one, and I always do this because I think one of the reasons that people can't stand any sort of business event is that they feel like a chore and they take all the fun out of it. So if
Sure.
you
Sure.
have a goal with joy, and I'll give you an example. So,
Yeah.
and let's say someone is hosting a holiday party and you've gone to it 4 or 5 times over the years. And let's say it's a professionally oriented one, but they bring in these amazing chocolate chip cookies from this vendor. Your goal can be, I want that fantastic chocolate chip cookie, which means, that they run out, they're going to run out pretty early on in the evening. So you want to get their time. You want to set up all those other goals around it. But if you have those goals, and that also gives you something to actually look forward to instead of just having a bunch of things you dread, there's like, okay, the light at the end of the tunnel is this.
Rob, why do you got to bring up chocolate chip cookies, man? That's like the weakness for me. I have yet to meet a bad chocolate chip cookie, other than if they have nuts in them. I'm definitely not a nut type person. But I love those three goals: confidence, purpose, and joy. And I never thought of it that way. And I love that you bring that up. So thank you for doing that, because I think the confidence piece is huge just to start with. Because, yeah, like, think of the last networking event that you were at. If you're listening here, watching, did you migrate to the people that you knew? Did you migrate to the people, did you sit at the company table, so to speak? Or are you an outside the box type person, open to new opportunities, and you sit somewhere different each time or whatever? Maybe it's a monthly, I host monthly networking events for myself, and we have a bunch of people that show up every month, and you can almost tell this. Oh, you can't sit back there. That's so and so's, right?
Oh,
But I
exactly.
love that. I love the confidence piece. So what a great place to start. And then I focused, prior to what you were talking about, I was thinking just that purpose piece of, hey, let's walk away with three, opportunities, three next steps, three whatever, or pick your number. So I love that purpose piece. And then the joy piece to make it really something that it can be fun. Because let's face it, Rob, I mean, the last thing we do, let's say we start at 7 in the morning and we're just hustling all day. And then you keep thinking, I got to be at this networking event at 5. It's kind of the last thing, at least for me, full disclosure, it's kind of the last thing I really want to do. I just worked my 10 hours and I'm like, man, now I want that. This is carving into my family time. This is carving into my personal time. And it's super easy to come up with all these excuses as to why not to do it. So at least if you can add that element of joy in there, I love that. So that's pretty cool. So let's just kind of walk through this. So you have this event coming up um, in your mind. So you're going to create some confidence goals. Do you suggest like having them prior to walking into that meeting, I'm assuming?
Absolutely. Every client that I work with, we develop that and kind of what their goal cadence is going to be for whether I'm working with them for a specific event or whether they're, going to things on a monthly or a consistent basis and just identifying and understanding the goals. Because goals should not be the same goals every single time because you want to be able to grow. And the thing about events that is interesting is that it's professional, but there's also personal elements to them. And that's the thing
Yeah.
about anything after hours is that there's a fusion of those two things. So, your goals for a networking event could be different than a seated gala dinner, as an example, and what you're going to want to accomplish out of each of those types of things.
And you help your clients kind of create those goals and establish them. And then I'm assuming they have to somehow align with your business plan, with the direction of your business. Because again, if you need to meet hundreds of people at a time, two or three solid meetings is not really going to scratch the surface as much as somebody that only needs a couple of connections here or there. So I got to believe that your goals really have to align with your profession and the meeting that you're going to, correct?
Very much, although I will say, some of especially the corporate clients I work with, it's not just strictly professional goals, but it's also development and personal goals. So I'll give you an example.
Sure.
So let's say there's an industry conference that's kind of a coveted one that a lot of people would secretly really like to go to. What a lot of managers will do by default is that they'll send their most charismatic extrovert there. But if you're going to an industry conference, it's really about intelligence gathering, information gathering, learning kind of what the newest trends are. And the thing is that and I'm an introvert myself, and there's introverts and extroverts. And any successful event, you have to have both because you need that balance of oxygen. I
Sure.
work with a lot of companies to actually be like, well, why are you only sending your extrovert? And what do you get out of it? Yes, they're charismatic, but the thing is that if bring a charismatic extrovert, people are coming to them and they're drawn to them and they're giving information. But if you're going to an industry conference, you want
Right.
to get information.
Sure.
So
Yep.
that's where I work with and be like, okay, who's an introvert that, they're a good listener, but they're not gonna they don't necessarily crawl into the corner. We look
Yeah.
at those people, and then that way it actually boosts overall team morale because people, a lot of people in companies, it's like, well, if they're going to send someone to a conference, it's going to be the most outgoing, charismatic person. And
Wow.
when you mix that up, it really boosts the morale for everybody because it's like, okay, every single person's strengths are being seen. So that's
Sure.
where I say the personal does get tied in with the professional.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So I look at it in a different way, and I want to get your feedback on the industry conference thing because I learned early on, like me, I speak all over the country at these, and that's my desire. That's where I really feel like I add the most value, and the most value comes back to me. So, do you run into people in your travels that have that desire to kind of not just attend, but they want to move into that leadership speaking type of thing? Have you seen that much from
It
your side?
It depends. Some people do, yes, and then other people just kind of want to be there and have a good time. Other people,
Sure.
everyone's kind of got different goals. And what
Yeah.
I will tell you is there is nothing more boring an event, and I've been to over 2,000 events over the last 15 years.
Wow.
So, and there is nothing more boring than when everyone's the same and has the same point of view. Like I cannot wait to get out of there. When that happens,
Yeah.
you want a blend and a mix, and you need people that really want to be there, and you need people that are chatty, and you need non-chatty people. So if the chatty people feel like that they have someone who's talking and they're actually listening,
Yeah.
and the thing is, and I understand, and it's interesting that you were kind of talking, about you love going to these types of things. Most people I have found, whether they're an introvert or an extrovert, like to talk about themselves.
Sure.
And, especially for someone who's an introvert and they're not really sure what to do, you don't have to necessarily even, and I learned this very early on in going to events, I don't necessarily have to have a two-way conversation. If I ask a couple of really thoughtful questions, some people are like wind-up toys. They just go and they'll talk for 15 minutes.
Right.
I've sat next to people for 2 hours at a dinner and asked four questions in two
Wow.
hours and
Yeah.
talked the whole time,
Sure.
because they'll just share valuable information. And when people feel open to you and you just ask open-ended questions and you're making eye contact and all those things, what people I'm never I was for a while, but I'm never shocked anymore as to what people share, because people will really share.
Yeah.
Even at professional events, they'll go deep. They will go and share a lot of really personal things. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. And some people, and you were, we request that you do disc assessment as a guest. It just helps me and it usually comes up in the conversation. But there are plenty of people, personality wise, that are reserved in that judgment. And there's a really fine line between that you don't want to cross between personal and business. There's certain personalities that you can't say. So, do you have kids or are you married? There's that line that people are like, hey, this is business. These don't connect, right? So, you got to kind of know your audience a little bit. I love that you're talking about that. What are some of the topics that, so let's say I walk into this, I have my confidence goals, I have my purpose goals, and I have my joy goals. And I'm walking into an industry type of event where there are definitely past clients, current clients, and prospects in the room there. What are some of those topics? What are some of those questions that I should have kind of queued up for me at the ready?
I'm glad you asked that. I have one silver bullet topic, and it's a topic that you can use really at any event that you go to. And that
Okay,
is, where have you traveled to?
uh,
Because obviously you're at an industry conference. People probably are traveling on business, but
sure,
they may have just gotten back from a vacation. It allows a bridge into the personal, and also travel is a really you can really understand somebody's hobbies, their interests, what they like, what they pay attention to. You can find all those things out through the travel question in a way that doesn't. And if someone wants to say, I went here with my kids, they
yeah,
can do that. And if they're talking about their kids and you have kids,
right,
then you can both talk about it.
right,
It's one of those to me, it's the ultimate bridge topic, because it can go anywhere. And I've had 45-minute conversations with people about travel that started with professional and wound up, well, we went here on our honeymoon and we did this
sure,
and we did it. It can really evolve and go, and you really get to know somebody if you're listening and paying attention in really subtle ways about them. And that, when you're looking to develop relationships with clients, there's the obvious that's there, but when you understand and you're paying attention to kind of those things that make them tick, you really can get a leg up on your competition with that.
wow. Well, and I don't know about the listener. What I struggle with, Rob, is in that situation, I ask a question and then the person starts to answer. And then either I get bored or I want to make sure and not have that painful silence. So I start thinking about like the next question in my head before they're even done talking. And I'm learning how tragic that can be because they're sharing great information and I'm back here thinking, what am I going to ask next? How am I going to integrate this in rather than just enjoying that piece? The anxiousness and the awkwardness, I think, is part of that piece right there. Number one, I guess, and this is a weird question, but I want to see what your feelings are. Why are people so scared of silence in that situation?
I
What are your
think
thoughts?
I think because if you're in a social situation and you're in a room with 100 other people, it's not going to be a silent room.
Yeah,
And because other people are talking, you feel like you have to be talking at all times. But again,
yeah,
like I said, there have to be the mix of energies and the mix of personality types for, think of a good event as like Earth. You have to have the right amount of oxygen and you want introverts and extroverts for that oxygen. And what I actually do with introverts in particular, because a lot of them, they'll get overwhelmed with, oh my God, what's the next question going to be? And I've actually found that this can actually, if you want to share this, I've seen with clients before that it's kind of a way you can kind of flip the script a little bit. And that is if someone's really chatty,
yeah,
the first thing, let's say they have a 3-minute response. If there was something interesting that they said 20 seconds in, that's going to be your next question. So you don't even
yeah.
have to think about the rest of that. And when you ask that follow-up question, it'll be like, oh my God, I said that 10 minutes ago. They think you're a really good listener because you picked up on this
Sure.
thing
Yeah.
from way back when. But it also, especially for introverts, it reduces the anxiety because they're like, I already know what I'm going to say next. And it allows them to be a little bit more calm.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Well, and I think the travel topic is pretty universal. It's pretty a safe topic. What have you gotten? I'm just curious if somebody's like, I never went anywhere, or, do you get people? Because there are some personalities, that tend to be one word answerers, very succinct to the point, results driven people. So, if somebody said, hey, if you came up to somebody, Rob, and said, hey, where have you traveled? Or, how you ask that, and they're like, I haven't gone anywhere, or if there's like a dud of a response, how do you recoup from that? What do you do next in that situation?
So here's what I tell people with that. Think about the last 100 people that you met. Have you vibed with all 100? Every single person will say no.
Right.
And when you're in a room with that many people, you're not going to vibe with every single person. And there's
Sure.
a difference in between being an introvert versus not wanting to be there or not wanting to talk to you. Some people just don't want to be there, and you can
Yeah.
tell. An introvert is not going to be, they're not going to be like this. They may kind of be looking away a little
Yeah.
bit more bashfully, but a one-word answer becomes a phrase, becomes a sentence, becomes a paragraph. The
Gotcha.
people that don't want to be there and you don't want to vibe with,
Yeah.
they're the people that, go on to the next person. There's really no again, when there's 100 other people, let's
Yeah.
say it's a
For
2
sure.
hour event. Why would
Yep.
you want to talk to somebody for more than 10 minutes anyway?
Right.
So you don't need to find one person and latch onto them for 2 hours because that's really not why you're there at a networking event. You want to meet as many people as you can.
Yeah, that's I think a hard thing to think of. I when you were saying that, I'm like, I just walk up to the guy or girl and say, I'm done with you. You know? But it's like you really don't want to do that, obviously, but that's your thought, right? And I think that makes a ton of sense, Rob, that you know what, in a room full of people, you can ask a question if you don't sense that vibe, unless they're a ultra mega perfect, prospect that you've been waiting years to get in front of. There's other people in the room that might have a better connection with you. And again, that comes back to the personalities because we tend to connect with people that are like us. And, I'm a talker, so I like to connect with talkers. If I have an introverted thinker type person, that needs to process the information, it slows me down and I'm okay doing it. But early in my career, I'm just like, come on, I asked you a question. Why is it so hard for you to answer this question? And it's like I had to learn the hard way that there are definitely different personalities. So that's pretty cool. So we're standing at this event, and I'm just curious, how do I stand out in this event? Because that's one thing I feel like a lot of us would love to do. I have longer hair, so that's easy for me to stand out physically, but just purely from an emotional, from a personality standpoint, from an energy standpoint, what are some things that you've seen that you can help us with on how to stand out?
You have first and foremost, and people can sense this from a mile away. And I've gone to enough events now that I can kind of mostly avoid that situation that you were just talking about.
Sure.
You can tell the people that want to be there if you are really looking. You can tell the people that want to be there versus the people that don't. So if
Okay.
you want to stand out, show up as the best version of yourself. And I tell people being your authentic self does not mean bringing all of yourself all the time. And I use the analogy of anyone who works out, no one does 365 days of shoulder presses in a row. And the reason is that if you do, your muscles will tear. It is okay to say, I'm going to work this social muscle. Treat your social skill set just like you would any other exercise training regimen that you're doing. You
Yeah,
need to work and develop certain muscles and certain things more. That may mean you may not have to necessarily reveal a certain part of yourself at that.
sure.
But when you bring the I want to be there, I want to be there to experience whatever this is. And the second thing I would say is your attire matters.
Mm,
And the what I and when I first started going to events 15 years ago when I was in corporate America, I owned one suit, no sport coats, no tuxedo, like none of that. But over the years,
yeah,
I've developed that. And the
sure.
thing is that the thing I get the most amount of compliments on is a green velvet dinner jacket that I bought for $99 on Black
Uh-oh.
Friday from a retailer named Paisley and Gray. And I get compliments on it, and I've got things that are custom. I don't get nearly as many compliments as I do on that. You don't have to break the bank to
Sure.
do it. But when you show up with some presence, but it feels like you know what, if it looked weird on me, people would avoid me. But if there's something, you have to make sure you wear the clothes and the clothes don't wear you. But
Sure.
attire can be a great watch. It can be a nice pocket square. It can be, an Hermes belt. It can be a lot of those different things, but something a little bit, people are naturally going to be drawn to that because what I have learned going, and a lot of the things I go to are galas. So
Okay.
with that, a lot of people are really well put together. And the thing is that when you're really well put together, it's those accessories that matter. So it's
Sure.
not necessarily as much about the suit you're wearing or the dress you're wearing. It's about those other details, whether it's earrings, whether it's a necklace, whether it's a watch, whether it's cufflinks, whether it's a scarf or a pocket square, whatever those things are.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to kind of unpack what you mentioned there about corporate because you were in corporate America. So we'll continue this discussion, but I want to unpack that because, like, we know there's a lot of people, Rob, listening right now that really wish they could jump in. And we love to unpack that story from each of our listeners or each of our guests. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. Honored to be hanging out with. I got to do it again. Rob Gian. Rob. Oh my gosh. Rob. I'm just gonna say Rob. You know what, Rob?
I've
Sorry
been
about
called
that.
Rob G at every
Rob
aspect of my
G,
life.
founder
So
of
if you want to
Event
go with that, go
Mindset.
for it.
Event Mindset. Oh my gosh, it's Tuesday. So anyway, thank you for jumping on. Thanks for being with us. One thing before we jump into the next topic is I wanted to because the first thing you said about showing up right with that right attitude in these events, and it was a little thing for me, but it was a big, massive mind shift because I remember having this thought, like I said before, I worked all day. Now I have to go to this. And I changed my have to go to get to go. And it really changed kind of the outlook because now I looked at it like a little bit more an adventure, a little bit more of a challenge, a little bit more of a win type, thing for me. So is the you obviously have mindset is a big part because it's in your name. So just kind of speak to that mindset piece before we jump onto the next topic here.
So again, the mindset, kind of what I was saying, before the break was, it's acting as though you want to be there. And the thing is that you are absolutely right. You get to go to an event because here's the deal. Guest lists always change. Events are like fingerprints. No two are alike. So it's going to be different, even if it's the best party in town every single year. Let's say someone throws a banging Christmas party. It's never
Yeah,
going to be the same exact guest. There may be a
sure.
different photographer, a different caterer, a different whatever. It's never going to exactly be the same again. So you get to go, but at the same time, you're if you either don't show up like you want to be there, or you
Yeah,
continually decline the invitation, you'll eventually fall off the list. And I know plenty of people, they'll get upset about that. And it's like, but you never wanted to go, but they wanted to be on the list.
yeah.
So I'm really glad you brought up the get to go because I think deep down everyone wants to get to go because if you don't get that invite, you're all of a sudden upset about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I always ask the question to people, I'm like, if you could meet one person, dead or alive, who would you want to meet? And then we lock in whoever that is. Usually it's somebody famous. And then the next question in this situation is if you knew that person, like I'd love to meet Tiger Woods just because I think he's an awesome golfer, or Michael Jordan, awesome basketball player. If I knew those two or one of those two guys were going to be at this event and they were going to be approachable where I could sit and have a conversation with them, oh my gosh, my day would be so much different than 10 hours leading up to that event because I'd be wondering what questions, I'd be making sure everything was just fitting right. I would just, there's such a different prep time. And so I'm like, why do you not think that for your next prospect or for your current client? If you can work through that mindset, like you were talking about here, Rob, I think that we would just approach this event so much different. And quite frankly, you never know. Like you just said, you never know who's going to be there. And, I remember I was in Vegas speaking at an event and I shared a stage with Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank. And I didn't know it was going to, I was just shocked that it just worked out that way. And if I wouldn't have showed up interested, excited, and energized, it could have been totally a different way. So I think that, just trying to really, I don't know if it pump yourself up or, but there's that. I start with your goals and then really that energy piece hopefully kicks in. But one quick thing on that, being an introvert, is there what encouragement do you have for somebody listening that's an introvert that's like really anxious and awkward to the point where they are so paralyzed that sometimes they don't even go to the event?
Well, I think it ties to a lot of what we've been talking about already. Know that there is a place for you at that event. You were invited for a reason, and you have something that you're bringing. And you don't have to be, like I said earlier, you don't have to be the life of the party. And once you realize that, a lot of that anxiety goes away. A great event, it's an ensemble, it's a tapestry, it's got a lot of interwoven things. Just be and focus on your part. You don't have to be the whole thing in the center of attention.
Unless
Because
you're
if
Santa
everyone wanted to
Claus at a
be,
Christmas party, right?
yeah,
If you're Santa Claus at the Christmas party, then you gotta be, then you are, right?
exactly. But if you're just an attendee that's showing
Yeah.
up, be the attendee that shows up. You don't have to be the whole thing to everybody.
I love that. That's so powerful. And again, I would rather someone go for 15 minutes and introduce themselves to one person. And I think that's the other thing, like I think of on the goal side is when if you have a confidence goal, a purpose goal, and a joy goal, and it's a networking event, not where there's like a long, drawn out event, but it's like a meet and greet. You can come and go as you want, open house type scenario. I feel like if I hit my confidence goal, I hit my purpose goal, and I hit my joy goal, and I feel good about those, is there any reason that I can't bail and go home to my family at that point?
You can absolutely do that if you want to, but also if you're having a good time, continue to stay. And the thing is, when
Yeah.
you go to an event, you're communicating. So a lot of that can actually, like I said, it can be translated to your personal life because if you become a better listener, I can't tell you how many times over the years I've had a conversation with somebody. It's made me think about something outside of that room. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, that's what this person's about, or oh, that's what my son meant, or oh, that's what my cousin meant. It there's just really something really interesting and powerful about conversations that you have with people. If
Yeah.
you've hit your goals and you want to go. My general rule is that you should stay at least 25% of the event.
Okay.
So if
Yeah.
if it's a 2 hour networking event, stay for 30 minutes
Sure.
and then go. But make the most use out of that time. And I'm more of a person when I first started going to events, when I was still in corporate America and going to events, kind of doing double duty.
Yeah.
I couldn't wait to sit at the table because it was like, oh my God, I'm done talking to this people, and it just drove me crazy and it made me really anxious.
Yeah.
Now I don't want to sit at the table.
Yeah.
I want to mingle around the room because now it's like an anchor.
Sure.
But it's an anchor in a completely different way. It became an anchor that stayed afloat to an anchor that's pulling me under the water.
Well, and I think that that's a great point because I think that for me the hardest part is when you have to sit down. You sit down at a table. If you look and you don't know a person now, you're kind of stuck with that pain of, do I look at their name tag? What do I say next? Again, this is now that anxiety and that awkwardness all starts all over. But yet it's worse because you're stuck in this spot. At least when you're mingling around, like you said, you can interweave and move about the room. Here, you're stuck at that table. And so it's like, man, that's just, to me, that's where my anxiety kicks in, right at that spot. Because now if I know somebody at the table, I'm gold. But if I don't, that's where it's really hard. So do you suggest not really knowing anybody at your table if you have the choice of where you want to sit?
It really doesn't matter. And this is what I do with any table I wind up seated at. I introduce myself to every single person there, even if it's a 10 round table and I
Okay.
know I'm never going to talk to them. I shake my hand and I introduce myself to every single person there.
Do you
I will
walk
go,
around the table then? Sorry to interrupt you, Rob. Do you walk around the table and literally do that way?
or if I'm seated first, usually, because of the nature of what I do, I'm usually kind of that person. It's the one way I'm probably not a good guest is I'm that person that they're trying to get to sit down. And remember, I'm an introvert that they're trying to get to sit down. Like it's a
Sure,
whole, but again, that's kind of my value at the event. I'm not the super chattiest guy, but I know a lot of people. And because I know a lot of people, because I've put in the work for 15 years, I
sure.
can do that. But if I am in a situation where I am the first or halfway seated. When someone new comes, I'll get up and I'll introduce myself to them.
That's so
So it really just
powerful.
kind of depends, but it creates that camaraderie around the table and it makes us all realize, everyone's there for some reason. Everyone has
Sure.
something in common if they're in that room.
Yeah.
What that is, and always start with that question. If that's a real easy way to kind of get it started of what brought you here? How do
Yeah.
you know the host?
Sure.
Why this trade organization? Whatever it is.
Do you think it's safe to say, Rob, that everybody at that table has some level of anxiety and awkwardness or is it just me?
Oh, everyone, there isn't a person on the planet that doesn't have some level some level of anxiety. And I've had the good fortune of going to things hosted by some of the world's best entertainers and individuals, and everyone's got something. Everyone's got a pet peeve. Doesn't matter who you are or anything. Everyone's got their insecurities, and someone can just by being there or by wearing a like I've seen all kinds of things where people get insecure over reasons that wouldn't make sense to anyone else, but they do make sense to that person.
Wow. So I'm resisting the temptation to ask for an example. So, so I'm going to succumb to it. Any fun examples that you can share?
Here's what I'll say. I went to something recently, and I would say this may have given the host anxiety. So there was this amazing, amazing, amazing auction package that probably should have gone for at least $250,000. And it went for $18,000. And the reason was that the people who were bidding in the room, and it involved several private jet flights. We'll just say that.
Okay.
Most of the people bidding had their own private plane, so that didn't matter to them. So they brought in this item that to anyone who doesn't own a plane was like, oh my God, that is the craziest, coolest thing.
Sure.
And it didn't go for that much money because it didn't match the audience. So it doesn't matter how high level or how perfectly executed an event is, there is always going to be a surprise. And once you realize that there's always going to be a surprise, you can kind of roll with anything.
Sure. Oh, that's so cool. Well, hey, before we land the plane today, I want to, no pun intended, I want to kind of unpack your journey because again, as I mentioned, a lot of people listening around the world, Rob, right now are in that spot where they wish that they could jump into being a business owner. So they look at you and I with some special, not that we're anything special, but in their mind, we've just achieved something they would love to achieve. So, kind of share your journey because you were in corporate America. And then was it something that you woke up the next morning and were like, oh my gosh, I'm quitting my job and starting something new? Did it overlap? Did you have a side hustle? Kind of walk us through what that looked like for you.
So mine is a very unusual on paper. there probably isn't another person who went from a tech salesperson to a social columnist. I know that that's probably highly unusual. So I have been in corporate America for 10 years in various, regional and global technology, sales, account management, brand ambassador roles. I met my now husband at a party in 2010, and he has run for the last 2 decades luxury lifestyle publications.
Okay.
So part of being in a relationship with him was we're going to be going to events all the time. And maybe about 4 to 6 months in to our relationship, he was like, "Have you ever considered writing about the events that you're going to? We're just write about the events that we're going to, even though it's a statewide publication." So I go to events all over, but primarily Austin, Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio, and living in Austin. And I started writing Austin events. And the more I started writing about, these great events that were raising a lot of money that were really well executed, the
Uh-huh.
less tolerance I had for corporate events, because they got painful to the point. And for 5 years, I was basically doing the corporate thing, getting on a plane, gone 3 or 4 days a week, then come home, throw on a tux, get a suit, sometimes have to drive to another city. And I did it for five
Yeah.
years. It was a lot. Loved every second of it, but
Sure.
that it kind of came to a point where you were running on fumes. But
Sure.
what also happened was I had less tolerance for the corporate events because they were often so well done. People didn't have goals. Everything always felt obligatory. As an account manager myself, it was like you have to take out so many people each quarter. Like it becomes this obligatory thing where
Yeah.
people want to phone it in. And I was just like, I just can't do it anymore. To the point where in the last year I was in tech, if I had meetings in New York, I'd stay in Philly or Boston and be like, sorry, I got to take the train home, can't go to dinner. Like I was doing those things. That's when I was like, okay, it's time to kind of make that jump,
Yeah.
into publishing. And that's where, I, made the jump into publishing. Then coming out of COVID, what I realized was even people who were through spectacular events, hosted spectacular events, everyone was a little rusty, myself included. And that's kind of what formulated me, to go from the publishing business that I had to founding Event Mindset to really help people. And really, it's a combination of everything I did in my first two careers. And it's kind of fused together into one. And often I'm going and doing this. And what I would say is 90% of life is showing up, so showing up and doing it. But if you've got an idea and the belief in yourself and you've got something that's uniquely you,
Yeah.
go for it. It will be scary because there's not the net there's, that a job comes with, but the freedom that you have and the experiences that you're able to kind of create for yourself are really, I'm just amazed at the things I've gotten to do over the last 15 years. There's certainly in my first 10 years of my career in the tech industry, I never in a million years thought I'd be doing the things that I'm doing now.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And we always put a caution there that there's no right or wrong way to start a business. There's no path or journey that's right. I had a guest on the show, Rob, that got married 6 days later, quit his job, didn't tell his wife, came home and said, "Honey," and he's like, for the listener, I really don't support this, but I did it, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, right? Thank you for that little caveat because it's like when you think about it, for some personalities, again, you go back to personalities, some people are risk averse and some love risk. And there's no right or wrong there. So obviously understand your family. If you got a mortgage and kids and cars and all this, it's probably not the best and you have no savings to say, hey, honey, guess what? So I think that
Exactly.
there's obviously wisdom in this, but I love the fact that you started in corporate and then eventually it moved into that. Did you know when you were in corporate early that you wanted to be in owning your own business in that, or was that not
No,
on your
in fact,
radar
I
right
never
away?
thought that that was a thing in the cards for me,
Okay.
because I definitely am probably a more risk averse person.
Okay.
But once I kind of got out of my own bubble, and everyone's in a bubble to a degree, but once I started doing things that I never in a million years thought I would be doing,
Yeah.
I was like, there are so many other, and I've always been a person, even though I'm an introvert, I've always been fascinated by people. So in a way, going to these events for the last 15 years, it's almost like that was what I was put on this planet to do, even
Sure.
though I'm not. I was never invited to the cool parties. I was in high school. I was never that guy. But because I understood my role in making something a success and making an event a success and acting like I want to be there, because any event I go to, I want to be there. And I make that
Sure.
very clear from the second I arrive until the second I leave. And I realized along the way that that was what I was put on this earth to do. And it's really tough, especially if you're in the corporate world. A lot of times people wind up in corporate not doing the thing that they were put on this earth to do.
Yeah,
And sometimes, and often you don't know what that is, but I'm one of I was fortunate that I found the thing that I was put on this earth to do almost unintentionally. It just
sure.
kind of organically happened. And
Yeah,
that made me as a risk averse person, it gave me the courage to make the jump because I was like, okay, this is why I should be on earth.
yeah. Well, and you can make that as spiritual as you want, that you can make it like really like your life's mission to figure out why you're here. I think it's interesting to like you said early on, you can tell when people are engaged in what they do and versus not. So I guess for the listener, that might be a litmus test for you is, how engaged are you in what you do? I run into people all over the country, as I'm sure you do, that they work their 50 weeks to live those 2 weeks of vacation, and then they got to stand in a line somewhere for 2 weeks and they bitch about that, and so I get it,
I
but
know
it's
you're
like,
talking
I haven't not owned my own business since 1991, so I don't even know what that's like. But I just know that I have every time I have a business, it scratches the itch that I need at that moment, and so like you said, your life's purpose, what a cool spot to be where you're able to say, this is why I'm here. And for the listener, if you can't say that, again, this is where we always suggest to do a little bit of digging, reach out, to Rob, reach out to me, reach out to other people that own their own businesses that and just kind of talk to them. It's so crazy how when people come up to me and they're just enamored with what I do, and I'm like, it's really not that hard. I'm a straight commission sales guy, just like everybody else, and I just happen to know what I'm doing, just like you know what you're doing in your industry, whoever you are. So um, I just appreciate that journey that you're on. Do you ever see yourself going back into corporate America, or is this have you closed that door, do you think?
The one thing I have learned is you never close the door to anything. Um, and the thing is that because I'll get these random invites to things that I'm like, I don't know why I'm on this list, but somehow
Yeah,
I am. And sometimes I'll
sure.
go and sometimes I'll be like, yeah, it's not for me. But being open allows your life to kind of go where I don't even want to say should go or
Yeah,
even needs to go, where it deserves to go.
yeah. Oh, that's a great way to put it. Hey, last question for you before I let you go. What would your tip of the day be, Rob, for somebody listening? Maybe it's something we covered, maybe it's something still on your heart, but what would your tip of the day be for somebody listening?
I recommend whenever anyone arrives to an event, stop at the entrance and scan the room. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, know where the bars are, know where the experiential activation is, know where the route to the bathrooms. And yes, even in the most crowded spaces, there's always a quiet nook. Fine, just know where those places are. It's amazing when you feel comfortable in a space and you see everything
Uh,
going on in the space that can really just ground and center yourself. So especially if you're awkward and anxious, you're probably going to be looking for that quiet pocket corner so you can do that, or the restrooms. If you're an extrovert, you're probably going to look for the bars, but I recommend everybody do it so that
yeah.
they kind of have their bearings on the space so that they can achieve those goals that we've been talking about during our time together today, achieve them effectively.
And always know where the exit is, right?
Always know where and how to exit, make a French exit, exit stage left, whatever exit that wants to be. And actually, if you go to eventmindset.com, you can download a free cheat sheet I have called 6 Ways to Gracefully Exit Any
Oh,
Conversation.
oh my gosh, because we didn't even get a chance to talk about the exit. So what a great spot. So jump on eventmindset.com and pick up that piece. So that's awesome. Thank you so much, Rob. If somebody listening wants to learn more about you, wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
So just email me at info@eventmindset.com, or you can find me on Instagram or LinkedIn at Rob Giardinelli. And you can look in the show notes for that because I know you won't listen if I spell it out.
Giardinelli. Yes. See, now I got it. Now that I'm done. So, well, let's do this over again. That you're just from the middle back when I read messed it up the second time. Well, that's so cool. So again, eventmindset.com or info@eventmindset.com is a great way to get a hold of Rob. So thank you so much for this. Again, congratulations. I think this is your first year with eventmindset.com. Is that correct?
Correct, it is.
That's so cool. Well, many years ahead of prosperity for you. I'm excited to watch where this goes. And thank you for unpacking this helpful piece. And I know that I'm going to start with confidence, purpose, and joy as my three new goals because all I was doing prior was the purpose piece. So thank you for adding those other two pieces. And I can't wait to keep learning from you, and we'll have to get you back to figure out how to get out of that room because I think ending would be a really great spot. So we'll put a bookmark there and we'll get you back for the future. And I appreciate everything, Rob.
Dave, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.